Mike Phillips here, and the topic of this video is going to be pad stalling, but I'm going to take a little deeper dive down the pad stalling rabbit hole. We're going to be talking about pad stalling between short stroke free spinning random orbital polishers and long stroke. And I also have a collection of gear driven orbitals to kind of show you the difference between the two. And mostly what I'm going to do is I've got a total of, I think, 16 polishers up here, but we're going to take a look at some short stroke and long stroke free spinning random orbital polishers on the hood of this car. I'm going to run them all the same on the 4 and the 6 speed setting. And this car has a concave curve right here. So when you're talking about the shape of a body panel, this would be a plane. It's pretty much the same level throughout the whole thing. And then it goes to this curve, concave curve, and then here's another plane. Then as you come down this high point, here's a plane, then here's a plane. A good example of a car with a lot of planes would be a C8 Corvette. There's not a single flat panel except for maybe the roof on the entire car. It's all a series of planes. It gives it that jagged, kind of exotic kind of look. But the problem with pad stalling is typically, anytime you're buffing with a free spinning, and when I say free spinning, I mean the pad, you can take your hand and freely spin it. And I'll show you how that works. If you were to take the backing plate, this is a Rupes Bigfoot 21, but this is kind of how all free spinning random orbital polishers work. There's the spindle, so that's what the backing plate attaches to, and see how I can just spin that freely with my finger. So it's not gear driven, it's a free spinning random orbital polisher. And the reason it's called a random orbital polisher is because it's not gear driven, the orbit stroke, due to variances in speed, pressure, shape of panel, even though it's a 21, it might only do like an 18 orbit. So it's random. It's random how much and how well it orbits. With a gear driven, on the other hand, and here's, let's show this. This is the Rupes Mille. This is you got to say it like that, Mille, okay? This is a 5mm gear driven. Listen to it. Hear the gears? And if I try to spin this like I did this tool, I can spin that freely. It don't spin, so it's gear driven. And it's called a gear driven orbital. The word random is gone because of the way the gear system is. It's gonna make the exact same orbit pattern no matter the shape of the body panel, the speed of the tool, the type of the pad, or how much pressure you're putting on, or how uneven. It's gonna do the same exact thing. So there's gear driven orbitals and there's free spinning random orbitals. Now I'm gonna run through all these tools. Just over here, I'm gonna go between this plane, and this plane, and this plane, and then you'll see as I go into these concave curves, you'll start to see the pad stalling kick in at different speeds. Towards the end of this video, however, I'm going to share my theory, and this all it is a theory. I'm not saying I'm right. I know everybody on the internet likes to argue and be an expert. I'm not that guy. I don't argue. You can argue with yourself. But here's a rock. This is a fulcrum, and this is a lever. And I'm going to explain my theory, and I'm going to use these three things to kind of explain my theory as to why I think you get more pad stalling with long stroke free spinning random orbital polishers than you do with short stroke free spinning random orbital polishers. And these little three things are going to help me, but I'll share that at the very end of the video. Okay, if you want to stick around for that. And of course, I would love for anybody else to make a video like this and explain the opposite of what I'm going to say, or be in line with what I'm going to say, you know, your different theory. All that good stuff. Okay, so let's go ahead and start out. This is the Harbor Freight Bauer, and this is a 20mm. See the 20 I wrote on there? So most of the long strokes are 15 and 21. Now we've got the DIY. Ivan and Nick brought out the 25. I think there's some other countries that have a 25, just massive long stroke, but this is kind of typical of a long stroke. It's a 20. Okay, so one of the things I always teach people to do in my classes is if you're going to use a free spinning random orbital polisher, you want to take a Sharpie marker and you want to mark the side of the pad or the backing plate or both, and that's just to make it easier for your eyes to see and monitor pad rotation and pad oscillation. So without the black mark, if I were to turn this on and look at it, since this is a yellow pad, I would see a blur of yellow, and this has a black backing plate, I would see a blur of black. I'd have to strain my eyes to look and see if the pad's actually rotating and oscillating. And by putting the black mark on there, it actually just makes it easier for your eyes to monitor both those things. And then, of course, if you're buffing along and you're trying to remove a lot of heavy swirls out of a car and you see the pad stall out, then there's a number of things you can do to maintain pad rotation and oscillation. And notice I always include both those terms. I always see people talk about pad stalling as it relates to pad rotation. But in a perfect world, you want good rotation and you want good oscillation. You kind of want 50-50 of each, and that way you get the most efficient defect removal, maximizes the use of your time. But anyway, so that black mark, it just helps you to do that. And of course, just real quickly, some things you can do to overcome pad stalling. I like what Rupes does. Here's the Rupes Duetto, and I'll show that in a minute. But all their tools, all their free spinning random orbital tools are designed to be run at the 4 speed setting. And then if you see pad stalling as you go into a corner or a thin panel or an intricate area, you can bring the speed up to 5 or 6 to kind of maintain that pad rotation, maintain that pad oscillation as you kind of power through those more difficult areas to buff. So that's a pretty good rule of thumb that I appreciate that Griot's comes out with something like that to help people. Or was I going with that? Marking the backing plate. Of course, and then with a gear-driven tool, and even though you don't need to mark the backing plates, I did, so when I run these over here, you can see there's 0 pad stalling. This is a gear-driven tool. So we're going to take a look at free spinning, a whole pile of them, gear-driven. I've actually got a rotary over here, and we'll just talk about all of them. So let me just kind of walk through the tools real quick. Starting right here, this is the one of the early Griot's Garage. They call it a GG6, okay? It is a copy of the Porter cable. And they quit making this tool, and then they introduced the G9. So both of these tools here, the Porter cable and the original GG6, are 8mm free spinning random orbital polishers. You can find these older ones still up on eBay. I was up there yesterday. It's all over the place. Pick them up for $100. They're got a lot of power, 900-watt motor. Okay, Harbor Freight came out and also copied the Porter cable. This is, they call this the Bauer 6-inch DA 8mm random orbital polisher. And it also is an 8mm free spinning random orbital polisher. And when you buy this, it comes with a 6-inch backing plate. And they used to call it the 6-inch DA, but it has not, the size of the backing plate has nothing to do with how the tool operates. So that's kind of ridiculous. To call it by the millimeters of orbit, or if it's just a rotary, just call it a rotary. Rotaries are a gear-driven tool. And then real quickly, I have some tools out here I just wanted to share with you. Back in the 1980s, Richard Griot and Barry Maguire, they both discovered this. It's a wood sander is what it is. Porter cable makes wood sanders. This is a wood sander. And both these gentlemen, Barry Maguire and Richard Griot, they found that because of the way this wood sander was set up with a Velcro backing plate, you could attach a buffing pad, and the average person could go out to their car, buff out their car, you know. And because it's free spinning, I demonstrated this recently in another video. You can't really hurt anything. Okay, I mean, you really can't hurt anything with this type of tool. And let me show you that with another one. So let me pick on a long stroke. Here's a Duetto, okay? Same thing. Not gonna hurt anything with this type of tool unless I physically drop it on the car. Okay, so that's one of the reasons these tools are very safe. But the thing I wanted to point out was all these cool tools that we have on the market today, ShineMate, MaxShine, you know, Zen, the Zen tools. You got the Adams polishes, swirl killers. You got the, who's the other guy there? Chemical guys got their Torx. All these tools kind of got their starter, they're resting on the shoulders of the Porter cable, okay? So before Barry Maguire and Richard Griot discovered this wood sander that could be used for paint polishing, the only tools we really had was a rotary, corded rotary obviously, and rotary back in the early 1900s when detailing became a thing, because the car was invented. The Model T was invented in 1908, and it was produced all the way up until 1927. They made 16 million Model Ts. And as I like to explain in my first car detailing book, I've written 6, but the first one I wrote, I said that it was the Model T that transitioned us from riding horses or being drawn by a horse in a carriage of some sort, a wagon, to driving a car. So, and then once the cars got out there, then at some point everybody tried to keep them running and keep the tires because there weren't really roads back then. But at some point they wanted to try to make them look good. So the first polishers were grinders that were slowed down, and now we call those a rotary polisher. So besides the rotary, another early tool we had, this came out in 1951. This is a cyclo. So this has dual heads. One of my backing plates is disintegrated. I don't use this tool much. I just show it to people. This is a 15 millimeter free spinning random orbital polisher. So again, the backing plates freely spin, but it is gear driven also because there's a gear that runs around inside this housing here that maintains their orbit also. So you kind of get a little bit of both, but since it's free spinning, you still get pad stalling with it. And then we have what's called a TOB. A traditional, I got all these extension cords back here. This is a traditional orbital polisher. Some people call it a steering wheel polisher because they look like a car steering wheel. These were pretty good back in the 50s and the 60s when all the cars had single stage paint. You know, the biggest problem with single stage paint is it oxidizes real easy. So a blue car gets chalky looking, and it's a chalky looking blue. And you could take a tool like this big old bonnet, throw some compound on here and buff, peel off and grind off that dead paint. Then change bonnets, throw another bonnet on here with some wax and put wax on. It look pretty good. But when it comes to clear coat cars, these really don't, they just don't do that much. So kind of ineffective. But those are the first early tools. There was also a tool called the WEN, W-E-N, I think. And these were big aluminum, kind of like the traditional orbital polishers. These were real popular, real heavy, but real popular. And I think I just unplugged. Oh, God. When I stepped on that, I broke my power. Stupid foot. Let's see, that'll probably work. Sorry about that. Anyway, all these other tools, whatever polisher you have, it's kind of, I forget how they say it, but it's kind of, they're standing on the shoulders of the Porter Cable. The Porter Cable really brought in the enthusiasts and the detailing market to be able to machine polish without using a rotary, without using a TOB, without messing around with the dual head cyclo. And now we've got all these really cool gear-driven orbitals and short stroke and long stroke orbitals, cordless and corded, but it all, in my opinion, all kind of is standing on the shoulders of the Porter Cable. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna run through all these tools. I'm gonna show you on speed 4 and speed 6. So I wanna be fair to all of them. By the way, they all have the exact brand and type of pad. This is the Buff and Shine yellow foam polishing edge guard pad. Some are 6-inch, some are 5-inch, but they're all the same. Because whenever you're doing testing, you wanna have controls in place to try to make sure none of your results are skewed. Okay, so then for a polish, this is the NSP95. You know, you gotta have some lubrication down when you're doing any kind of testing, otherwise the pad will grab the paint and it'll skew what you're seeing also, so you need some lubrication. For you seasoned experts out there, you would consider this a fine cut compound, but it is an NSP primer, so it's all completely inorganic. You could go right to a coating after using it. Okay, so I'm gonna put this on the 4 setting. This is the Bauer 20 millimeter, and I'm gonna run it back and forth over these 2 concave curves, and if you pinch in or if you look closely, you should be able to see if you've got good pad rotation or anemic. Anemic means weak pad rotation, pad oscillation. Okay, let me spread my product out a little bit. Okay, so there's speed 4. I've got pretty good pad rotation. Now when I start to come into the curve on speed 4, I don't really see any slowdown in pad rotation. If I go to this side of the body line, this is a much more intense concave curve. And what the concave curve does is it puts pressure here and here with nothing down the center. And it's when you have uneven pressure on the outer edges of the pad, that's what tends to cause the pad stalling or lack of pad rotation, lack of pad oscillation. Okay, so when I go into this curve, it slows down a little, but not, there it goes, just barely rotating right there. I'm gonna bump it up to 6 now. On the 6-speed setting, this actually maintained fairly decent pad rotation and pad oscillation. You could run it on 4 on the big flat planes like you would a Rupes, and then when you get into the corners, bring up the speed, power through them. Okay, this is the Flex. They call this, I forget the part number. I never like calling tools by their part numbers. There was a contest on the AutoGeek forum years ago, and the contest was if Flex picked the name you submitted, you would win a free polisher. One of the guys on the forum won, and he called it the Finisher because it's for finishing work, not for heavy duty grunt work. This is a 15 millimeter free spinning random orbital polisher. Let me put a little bit of polish on here. This one side of this car is going to get a really nice gloss today. Okay, there's the 4 setting. Now, I got pretty good pad rotation right here where it's just sitting flat on this flat plane. Watch what happens when I go into the concave curve. Boom. Look at that, it's completely stalled out on the 4-speed setting. Picks back up when I get on this plane, when I'm on this plane or that plane, but when I have the pad right between the curve there, it really tends to cause the pad stalling. Let's come over here and try this extreme concave curve. It's okay on that plane, barely even rotating when I go up on that curve. Okay, let's bump it up to 6. Okay, pretty good pad rotation on this flat panel. What happens when I go into the concave curve? I got a little pad rotation, but it's kind of anemic when it's right there. When it's right there for the center of the radius of the concave is right through the middle of the pad. So that means extreme pressure on this side, extreme pressure on this side, no pressure in the middle, pad stalling. So that was the 6th setting. Okay, here is the Rupes Duetto. This is a 12 millimeter free spinning random orbital polisher. We'll put a little bit of polish on there so we got some lubrication. And let me set this to the 4. Okay, there's the 4-speed setting. Okay, on this flat plane, we got pretty good pad rotation. Let's see what happens when I bring it into this gentle radius concave curve. Right there, it's completely stalled out. When I get on this plane, I get pad rotation. This plane, pad rotation, right in the middle. Right in the middle, again, I got extra pressure here and here, nothing down the center. Pad stalling. Let's try the extreme concave curve here. Same thing. There's good rotation right there, but this is a flat surface. Here's the curve. As soon as I go into it, it just stalls out. So what you can do then is bump this all the way up to the 6. Let's see the same thing on 6. Really good pad rotation on the flat plane. As I start to bring this into the curve, look at that, completely stalling out. Okay on this plane, okay on this plane, in between the 2 planes. There's just a struggle there to maintain good pad rotation, good pad oscillation. And I know that some of the experts in the industry say, well, you don't need pad rotation as long as it's oscillating. Well, that may be true, but you know, I've been doing this since the 1980s easily. And here's what I know. You want both. You want good pad rotation and good pad oscillation, and that makes the most efficient way to abrade the surface, to level it, to visually remove defects, and make the best use of your time, okay? But I'm sure if it's just oscillating and there's no rotation, I'm sure it's doing something. It's just not going to be as efficient. So you want to see a little bit of both. That's why. Okay, this is the Griot's G9. So this is a 9 millimeter. This was what Griot's introduced after they killed off the GG6. Okay, so it's 1 millimeter larger than overt stroke. They changed the body of the tool a little bit. This is actually one of the first ones ever made. My good friend Doug Hodge, we used to work at McGuire's together. He sent this to me to test. I wrote a review. You can find my review up on the AutoGeek forum. Very nice tool. Let's take a look at this. I put it on the 4 setting. Look at that. We got good pad rotation here. I'm going to start bringing it into this curved panel. It's still rotating as I get into the curve. Now I'm back on this plane. Good rotation right in between 2 of them. It's maintaining pad rotation and oscillation is kind of weak. Let's come over to this side. On this plane, good pad rotation. Here's this extreme concave curve. And even just putting the edge of that right into that curve, it's still maintaining pad rotation and pad oscillation. So let me go ahead and bump this up to 6 and we'll just try the same thing. There's the 6, really high RPM. And that concave curve didn't even phase it. So they did a good job. However they designed that counterweight and that reciprocal components, they did a good job. Maintains pad rotation fairly well. Okay, so this is the Harbor Freight copy of the Porter cable. They're both 8 millimeter free spinning random orbital polishers. And as I mentioned before, these come with a 6-inch backing plate. So to demonstrate this, I went ahead and left it on. I do recommend if you buy one of these to go ahead and get a 5-inch backing plate, because then you can turn and churn smaller pads. Let me show you the difference. Here's a 5-inch pad, here's a 6-inch pad. And it's just easier for this tool to maintain pad rotation when you cut down on some of that surface area. Okay, let's see what this will do. Let me set this on the 4 like all the other tools to start with. Okay, out here on this plane, we got pretty decent pad rotation. Let's see what happens when I creep into this concave curve. On that plane good, in between, just starting to stall out on me there. Okay, good pad rotation on this plane. As I come into this extreme concave corner, stalling out on me. Not bad, but it's stalling out. Let me bump it up to 6. Okay, really good pad rotation on 6. As I come into the concave curve, it maintains pad rotation over the raised body line, onto this plane, good pad rotation, into that curve, good pad rotation. Not bad for a $65 tool. Okay, let's check out the original, the Porter cable. This might be one of the weaker ones up there. I do like it better. People go, why do you like it better? Well, because for the things I use it for, it works for me. I just think the build quality is much higher than, say, the Harbor Freight version. Okay, there is the 4 settings. So these are pretty weak on anything from 5 and below. There's 4. It's maintaining pad rotation and pad oscillation, but not very well. As soon as I go into that curve, it just stalls out. The same thing's going to happen here. Anemic pad rotation, oscillation. As soon as I go into this extreme curve, it just almost completely stops. Let me bump it up to 6. There's the 6. Now I've got some pretty decent pad rotation there. Let's see what happens when we go into the curve. Still maintains pad rotation. It gets a little weaker. It gets a little weaker when half the pad is on this plane, half the pad is on this plane. So there's pressure here, no pressure there. But it still maintains pad rotation. Now let's try the extreme side. It's the same kind of thing. It's maintaining pad rotation. I like this tool just because of the fit and finish, but I would have to say I think the Harbor Freight actually has more power. Then here's the old GG6, and again, this is a copy of the Porter cable. And I mentioned these were really popular back when they made them. They kind of jumped on that long tool bandwagon, like everybody has this big old long body on here. I kind of like the shorter, stockier version, especially for like if I'm machine sanding with a tool like this. Okay, let's put this on the 4. There's 4. Pretty decent pad rotation right off the gate there. I'm coming into that curve, stalling out a little bit. Now I'm on the other plane. Not bad though. Okay, so here's a nice smooth plane, good pad rotation. As I go into this curve, still maintaining good pad rotation. So not bad for a tool that's probably 10 years old. And like I said, I was up on eBay just the other day, go to check, and you can still find these for around $100. Okay, so that was our free spinning random orbital polisher collection. We had 8mm, 9mm, 12mm, 15mm, 20mm, and I think the tool that probably had the best showing here would be the Flex Finisher 15mm, the Duetto 12. They both seem to struggle to maintain pad rotation going from one plane to another plane. When they're on a plane, they spin and rotate and oscillate fairly decently. These other tools, especially the Grills Garage G9, I think that probably did the best. Behind that would probably either be the G6 or the long stroke 20mm from Harbor Freight. Okay, now, because I know some of the people watching this may not own a polisher or may not have years of experience, these are free spinning random orbitals, but I also just want to show you what the primary difference is with the gear driven. So this is the Rupes Millet. Whenever you say Millet, you got to take your hand and do this. The Millet, okay? And this is a 5mm and not free spinning, so I can't freely spin that pad. And I did mark it, but you don't have to mark a gear driven tool. It's going to rotate and oscillate the pad no matter what, and I'll show you that right now. Oh, let me put a little lubrication on there. This is going to be the 4-speed setting. Now watch. I can't no matter how hard I push down or even I hold in the curve, I can't stop that pad from oscillating or rotating. You get both equally no matter what. And so to me, that's kind of the benefit to a gear-driven orbital polisher for my style of detailing. For other people, they don't like the way it pulls them a little bit. That pulling, by the way, is the pulling, starts with the letter P, but that pulling, there's another word that's what that stands for, is power. You feel the power by the pulling. The other tools don't pull because they don't have the same power. They'll just sit there and spin out a little bit, and it makes it real smooth to buff with, but you're not getting the same oscillation or rotation that you do with the gear-driven. So I much prefer, at least to do the bulk of my heavy-duty paint correction, to use a gear-driven orbital. Not only do you have efficient defect removal because you got both pad oscillation, pad rotation, no matter what, but there's another thing about this. Remember when I said earlier, if you got a free spinning tool to take your Sharpie marker and to mark the backing plate or the side of the pad, and that'll make it easy for your eyes to see and monitor. That's two things, to see and monitor good pad rotation. Without the black marks, you just get a blur of yellow and a blur of black. Well, here's what else that means, okay? So let's go down that rabbit hole a little deeper. If I've marked my backing plate and my pad so I can see and monitor pad rotation, okay? Doesn't that mean I gotta look the entire time I'm buffing? Is the pad rotating? Is the pad rotating? Is the pad rotating? Is the pad rotating? I'm pretty fast at this. This is a mid-size SUV. If this thing was really bad shape, it's not, but if it was, it'd probably take me anywhere from 4 to 6 hours to compound this car, the first paint correction step to get it to show car status. So that means for 4 to 6 hours, I gotta look and see, is the pad rotating? Is the pad rotating? Is the pad rotating? Is the pad rotating? Oh, it's not rotating. Okay, let me adjust how I'm holding the tool. Okay, let me bring the speed up. Okay, let me put a dry pad on, because wet pads don't rotate very well on free spinning random orbital polishers. So there's things you can do, but if you go to a gear-driven tool, you don't gotta look to see if it's gonna rotate and oscillate at all. It's going to do it no matter what. So I call that brain drain, and I just don't like to do brain drain when I buff out a car. I want to think about something else, like my section passes. Okay, so that's the Melee. That's a 5mm. This is the Hercules forced rotation dual action polisher. This is, for the most part, a fairly exact copy of the original Flex XC3401 VRG, aka the Beast. Okay, you can see the exposed aluminum heads. Gear driven, it's not free spinning. And just like the Rupes Melee, put some product on there, I won't be able to stop this from rotating or oscillating no matter how hard I push on it. Watch. You just can't do it, okay? So zero pad stalling. And again, this is just kind of the difference between a free spinning and a gear driven. Okay, also, you know, these are popular because of the price point. You can pick this up for $100 at Harbor Freight. A Flex 3401 or the Beast costs around $500. Okay, so everybody goes, oh, they're the same thing. No, they're not. All the Flex tools come with a 7-function microprocessor that does really cool things. It's just these other cheaper knockoff tools don't do. Let me show you one of them just to demonstrate it. I got to find the plug-in. Where is this thing plugged in at? Right here. Okay. Okay, say you're buffing along, you lose power, lightning hit, something, power comes on, it comes back on. The Flex, one of the functions of the 7-function microprocessor, you're buffing along, power goes out, then power comes back on. Oh, look, it's not working. Got to release the trigger. Now it'll come back on. So it's a little protection feature. It keeps it from grabbing your shirt and you get wound up because you're not paying attention because your polisher just turned off. So there's a lot of difference on the internals that you just don't see on the outside. And they discontinued making the Flex. I don't sell Flex. I don't make a dime when you guys buy one. But if you want a Beast, you better get one, and also get a couple extra backing plates because those are what's called a wear item. They wear out. You know, a hook and loop. Let's see, I got hook. Here's a backing plate. So a backing plate has the hook, and then the back of the foam pad has the loop, hook and loop. Every time you put a pad on and off, it stretches out the hooks, and pretty soon they quit holding onto the loop. So Backing plates are wear items. They wear out. So try to have a spare backing plate, and make sure if you got tools like these, the porter cable, you don't lose the wrench. It takes a very thin 9/16 to get in there to hold the spindle to get the backing plate off. So there's a thing called a PC wrench. The Griot's Garage has one too. They're very thin. If you lose that wrench, you're going to really have a hard time getting any kind of wrench in there. Okay, so that was the Hercules. This is called the Super Beast, okay, not super, the Super Beast. This is the newest version of the original Beast. Now you can see the aluminum head is covered up with plastic. It's still there, it's just covered up so you don't burn yourself. Because, you know, no matter what brand it is, it gets pretty hot. When you're buffing for hours, it gets hot and you touch it. It's not gonna burn your skin up, but it gets hot. But the plastic just avoids all that. This is also an 8mm, just like the original Beast, just like the Hercules. And same kind of thing with this tool here. Oops. Remember a couple minutes ago I stepped on this. Back here behind the scenes I've got all these cords all over the place. So if I could just get a couple more seconds out of that, that'd be good. Okay, so same thing. High speed. I can't stop that pad from rotating and oscillating. Again, difference between gear driven, free spinning. Also, just real quickly, I was on a Facebook group, it's been about 3 weeks ago. Someone had some tools up there for sale, and I said out of the 3 tools there, the original Beast was the most powerful. And this guy come back and says, "What do you mean that's the most powerful? There's a rotary there." I wasn't comparing gear-driven tools to rotary. Of course, rotary is more powerful. I was comparing the original Beast to the Super Beast to the Sea Beast. And the original Beast has the highest OPM and RPM. The Super Beast, they've knocked off a couple OPM and RPM to make the tool smoother, cooler, quieter, and lighter. Smoother, cooler, quieter, 4 things. Less OPM. And then the cordless version is called the Sea Beast. C stands for cordless, Sea Beast. It has even less OPM and RPM because the engineers figured out to get more battery life, they wanted to kind of bring the OPM and RPM down. So out of the 3 tools, the original Beast has the most OPM, the most RPM, so thus the most power. And that would hold true for the Hercules, although the Hercules brand doesn't have 2 other tools like it that have lower RPM and OPM. Okay, then here is the Makita. I did the original prototype testing for this tool for Makita. They had 2 engineers from Japanese fly to Stuart, Florida. I set up a class with 25 guys. They all had to sign a non-disclosure, and I brought in a bitchin' 1940 Ford panel wagon street rod, bright red. Pictures are still up on the Geek Forum. And everybody had a chance to test this tool out and right there and then give those Japanese engineers their feedback. And I actually told them, you know, as a favor to me, I'd like to have the prototype back after they're done taking it apart and looking at it. And they just didn't respect that request. I never got the prototype. I did write a very exhaustive review for this, in fact, showing paint correction and sanding with it. And that's still up available on the Auto Geek Forum. For that, I think I used the 1970 Plymouth Duster in lemon drop yellow. Pretty cool muscle car. Now, one of the things that separates this from all the other tools is they built in this little switch here, and you can flip this 180 degrees, and you can go from free spinning, oh, I probably just broke it. Here's free spinning to gear driven. Now you can go, wow, that's a pretty cool idea. I got the best of both worlds, except for one thing. In the free spin mode, it won't maintain pad rotation for paint correction. It will for a sanding disc, it's just thin, so it's pretty easy to oscillate it and rotate it, but it will not maintain pad rotation when you put a foam or microfiber buffing pad on there, so you can't really do any paint correction in the free spin mode, but you can in the gear drive mode. And this is like the Melee. Here's the Melee. These are both 5mm. Whereas the Flex and the Hercules are 8mm, so a difference of 3mm. So let me just demonstrate this one. There's the 6-speed setting, same thing. No matter what the shape of the panel, that pad's gonna rotate and oscillate no matter what. Anyway, that's the PO 5000C. By the way, when I did that testing for Makita, I highly recommended they give that tool a nickname, like Bigfoot or the Beast or the Finisher, something. I recommended this to Lake Country for the Udos. I never liked the Udos name. You want to give your tool a cool nickname that people can remember and say easily. You're never going to get all the detailers out there to call that the PO5000C. They're not going to do it. So free tip from Mike Phillips, all the tool manufacturers, give your tools a cool, catchy name. Okay, then I have this out here, just because I wanted to also just talk about this. When I'm on social media, mostly Facebook, sometimes Instagram, I see people talk about this as a random orbital polisher or a DA. I see people talk about these gear-driven tools as forced rotation. That is so inaccurate. This is forced rotation. It rotates a pad. It's gear-driven, forced rotation. This is forced rotation, forced oscillation. 2 drive actions, not just 1. But again, because this is gear-driven, there's just no way to stop that pad. And in my opinion, this is the fastest and most powerful paint correction tool, just because you could throw an 8-inch wool pad on there, grab a great compound, and you can take care of anything. And then I have 2 other tools here I just wanted to kind of talk about. Okay, so I've got the Rupes Nano Long Neck, which I really like in rotary mode. I don't really use it in random orbital mode. Hey guys, I need y'all to move over here. Need some room. Okay. There's Rupes Nano. This is the Flex PXE80. Me and a lot of people just call it the Pixie. You run the PXE together. Pixie. When this first came out, I actually sent an email to Christian Nooner, the president of Flex. And when this tool came out, it came out with a 12 millimeter, and this is there's the spindle. See, it's free spinning. Big counterweight, 12 millimeter. So it's a free spinning random orbital polisher with this drive unit in there. It came with a 3 millimeter, tiny little counterweight. Whoops, damn it. But it has the same thing. The spindle spins freely. And that means that when you're buffing with one of those 2 things, the pad can stall out. And a lot of people, they don't like that about the Pixie. They want it to be more powerful. But that's the problem with it. But for me, I mostly just like this tool for rotary. So it comes with a rotary drive unit, and this has a 3-inch extension. Put a 1 or 2-inch pad on there, and you've got a great little rotary polisher for A-pillars, tight areas, doing interior work. Awesome little tool. But you will see that pad stalling. But the thing I wanted to mention was that when you buy one of these tools, it comes with the 3 millimeter, the 12 millimeter, and the orbital drive unit. Let me walk over here and grab this. Sorry about that. I always hate walking off camera when I'm doing video work, but I am down here by myself, so I have to do it. Okay, when this first came out, it came with the 12, the 3, and the rotary. The first week it came out, and I got one, I went out and started testing it, and I use this tool mostly as a sander. You know, when I look at this tool and go, wow, heck with paint correction, that's a great 3-inch mini sander, because there's not a lot on the market, and especially no electric ones. But when I started testing it out and sanding with the 3 millimeter, the rotation of the sanding disc was anemic. That means it was weak, and it would barely maintain sanding disc rotation or sanding disc oscillation, so it was useless. The 12 millimeter did a better job at maintaining sanding disc rotation and sanding disc oscillation, but because the orbit stroke was so big, as you get close to an edge, you hit the edge, or you don't get a sand next to it. Now you got to come back and what? Sand by hand? The whole idea of sanding a car down is to use the tool in your hand to sand the car down. So I just sent a letter to Christian, and I says, hey, I don't care if you send me a 5, 6, 7, or 8, but I need something in between 3 and 12. And they sent me this 6 millimeter. And the rest they say is history. Now you can buy this as an option. But that's where it came from, is me asking Flex to give me something in between 3 and 12 just for sanding. I teach a lot of sanding classes. I sand a lot. I think I'm on my 4th or 5th card this year, complete sand jobs. And I like to do machine dry sanding with Eagle abrasives and machine damp sanding with Eagle or 3M Trizac. And there's just no really, except for this, there's no other really great mini sanders on the market. Then of course, this is one of my all-time favorite tools. This is the Flex Nano in long neck. Okay, so you get a little more reach, get into tight areas. And I rarely ever use this with, it comes just like the Flex PXE80. It comes with a 3 millimeter drive unit, a 12 millimeter drive unit, and rotary drive unit. And for the most part, I just use this thing in, it's always just in the rotary mode. Love this little tool. Great for doing A-pillars, a trim, tight areas. Just a really cool tool. Anyway, that's kind of all I really got. I just kind of wanted to talk about this subject of pad stalling. It's not a deal killer. It's just there's a huge difference between using a free spinning random orbital polisher and a gear driven orbital. Notice the word random's gone. With one, you got to spend a little more focused attention as you're buffing to make sure you maintain both good pad rotation and good pad oscillation for fastest defect removal. With the gear driven, you don't even got to think about it. You just turn it on. It's going to plow through the car as fast as you can go and keep your quality high. The biggest difference, I'd say, from a practical point of view, besides the time factor using a free spinning tool versus the gear driven polisher, is the brain drain aspect. With the free spinning, if you're always looking to see if you're maintaining pad rotation, pad oscillation, it means you're constantly have to look and think about it. And when I use a gear driven, instead of thinking about if the pad's rotating or oscillating, I can just count my section passes. Everybody knows that when I'm buffing out a car, in case, again, if this is the first video you've ever seen by me, let me show you what I mean. When you buff out a car, here, I'll give you a quick lesson. And I'm just grabbing this tool because it's the closest one to my hand. I have no preference for it. But you never start here in buff in, which I see all the guys do. You start here and buff out. Same thing on the roof. You start in the center and buff out. And so if I was buffing out this car, here's what I would do. I'd turn this on, spread my product out, and then you start making section passes. And you figure out, and the section passes when you go over a section of paint, one direction crosshatch, and then you do it another time. So every time you go over that section, that's called one section pass. Here's two section passes. Here's the third section passes. And when you do your test spot, what you're trying to do is you're trying to dial in how many section passes does it take with the pad you've chosen, the abrasive technology you've chosen, the type of tool you've chosen, and your technique, plus two huge factors into how many section passes you need to make in order to remove the defects is the hardness or the softness of the paint and the depth of the defects. So shallow scratches will come out of soft paint really fast. Shallow scratches might not come out of hard paint very easily. So there's some factors, but that's what the test spot is for. The test spot is to dial in and prove the process you think is going to work actually does work. And when you're doing a section pass, my good friends at Rupas, they teach doing 2 section passes. I teach doing 4. But most of the cars I bring in aren't nice. They're really bad shape. And I already know 2 section passes, unless it's really soft paint with shallow defects, simply isn't going to work. So 1 isn't going to do nothing. 2 might start to do something. So I usually do 4, wipe off and inspect. Now, if all the defects are gone and I'm just using a polishing, so not cutting, not finishing, not a fiber, just right in the sweet spot of non-aggressive or aggressive, a foam polishing pad and a polish, and I make 4 section passes, and the majority of the defects are gone, that tells me the paint's soft and the defects are shallow. If 4 passes doesn't even phase it, well, now I'm starting to go, maybe the defects are deeper, maybe the paint's harder. I can either try to do more passes with the same combination, which I would, another 4 passes, that's a total of 8, look at it. And if that isn't getting it, that's when I would switch over to either a more aggressive pad or a more aggressive product or even a more aggressive tool. And then I would do another test spot in a different area of the paint. Every time you do a test spot, you can't duplicate it in the first place you did it because you've already removed some paint. Your results will be skewed. So anyway, my point I wanted to really make about this is when I'm buffing out a car, I count my section passes out loud because it's too easy for the human brain to go, I wonder what's for dinner tonight. And then you go, oh, what was I on? Was that 3 or 8? I don't know. I know I'll do a few more to make sure I did enough so the car looks good. Well, that adds a whole hour of buffing time. So when I'm buffing, here's what it would look like. Let me just demonstrate. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I can count them out loud. I can concentrate on what I'm doing so I can buff out the car as fast as I can while keeping my quality high. If the whole time I'm buffing, I gotta look to see if the pad's rotating, I call that brain drain. Now I have to do that and count my section passes. So however you want to get to shiny, it's really up to you. But I'm telling you some tips and techniques that work for me, and that's counting my section passes out loud. And at least for the initial cut, if you're working on a car that's really in bad shape, deep swirls, scratches, water spots, oxidation, sandy marks, For me, it's faster to use a gear-driven tool for both the dynamics of how the tool operates, plus the brain drain. I don't got to spend my time on that. I can just focus on counting up my section passes, so I'm the most efficient with my time. Anyway, hopefully that'll help you with some of that. But at the end of the day, all these tools will get the job done. It's just what's your preference. I do know that a lot of people, let me grab the Duetto. A lot of people, this is a very smooth tool. Very, very smooth. It's very well balanced. It is so smooth. A lot of people like any brand of free spinning tool because it's so smooth. It's just, what happens is because this is a free spinning, got a free spinning spindle on there, instead of say grabbing the paint because you're holding it crooked or into a curve, it just kind of stalls out a little bit, and that shows up as being smooth. People like that. So I see a lot of guys complain about a gear-driven tool because it pulls them, okay? Oh, I got into that curve, it kind of pulled me. I don't like it pulling me, or they call it the walking effect. Okay, that pulling, here's another word that starts with the letter P, power, okay? Instead of just slipping, the pad just slipping on the finish because it's a free spinning random orbital polisher, you'll feel a little pulling because it's got the power to polish that paint no matter what shape of it is or how hard you're pushing. So that thing people don't like is called power. You know, I never met anybody who goes, yeah, I wish I had a Corvette with a small block. You know, I'm old school guy. I'd want a 67 Corvette with the 427, not a 350. I want more power. Most of the guys I meet think like that. I want power. But when it comes to polishers, a lot of guys want that smoothness instead of the power. And that kind of shows up in how long it takes to buff out a car and how much brain drain you got to expend and how you count your section passes, all that good stuff. Now, let me go on to why I think long stroke polishers stall out easier than short stroke polishers. This is, by the way, the best analogy that's visual I've been able to come up with. It's kind of a tricky thing to try to explain. But here's my rock, here's my nail file, and here's a simple little, foam coating applicator for putting coatings on. So if you're out in the wilderness and say you needed to move a rock and you've got a fulcrum, you've got a lever, and the thing you want to move, a log or something, maybe there's a log fall across a tree and you're trying to lift it up and get out of the way so you can get by. The way this would work is you'd want to get the short end of the lever close to the rock and the long end on the other side of the Velcro because that gives you more leverage. It makes it easier for you to lift something heavy. Okay, so how that applies to a long stroke, not short stroke, long stroke, free spinning random orbital polisher, this is just my theory. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just going by what I've seen over the decades of polishing cars with every tool on the market. But when you have excess pressure on the outside of a big pad like this on a long stroke polisher, the edge of the pad has leverage, just like this did, over the spindle, and it causes the pad to stall out. Now, if that's true, I'm not even saying it is, but if that's true, the exact opposite is true. If you grab a short stroke polisher, let me grab Mr. Porter Cable here. Okay, 8mm instead of 20mm, the outer edge has less leverage over the spindle, okay? So that would look like this. Now, if I tried to lift the rock up and I only got a short stroke, I can still do it. It's just a stupid demonstration, but it's going to be a lot harder to do, okay? So that's my theory. The larger the stroke, the larger the pad. And think about this. When you buy a long stroke polisher, doesn't it usually come with like a 6-inch backing plate so you can turn and churn and burn 7-inch pads? You don't see these long strokes coming with 3-inch backing plates, So they come with bigger backing plates, bigger pads. The outer edge of the pad has leverage over the spindle, causes pad stalling. That's my theory. You see it less with Porter Cable. So some people over the years have asked me, Mike, if you could only choose one tool, what would you pick? Well, I don't live in that hypothetical world. I live in a world where I can have all the tools I want. But if I just had to narrow the minimum tools I would need to tackle anything, boat detailing, glass polishing, paint polishing, scrubbing tires, whatever it is, I would choose a cordless rotary, a Porter Cable, and a gear-driven Orbital. With the rotary, I can do heavy correction, whether I'm removing oxidized gel coat off of a boat, if I'm pulling sandy marks out of the Camaro I did last week, or if I'm just trying to remove years of deep swirls and scratches on hard paint, I can use the rotary. If I need to do some machine sanding, I would much rather use that cordless DA sander up there, but if I didn't have one, I could use the Porter Cable. It's an 8mm or what you'd call a rough work sander, not a finishing sander, but the opposite, rough work. So you gotta be a little bit careful, but I've sanded down so many cars with the Porter Cable, it works. And then of course I could also use it to polish paint. So if I get a car with soft paint, I said this before, but I'll say it again. When it comes to working on soft paint, here's how I say this, and I'm very specific because I've been typing this out for years. Generally speaking, a free spinning random orbital polisher will finish out nicer, more consistently than a gear driven orbital. It has to do with that slip factor of the free spinning rotating, the free rotating spindle assembly. Here, let me show you. When I talk about free spinning rotating assembly, it's this thing. Okay, this thing will slip, so it's smoother but it'll tend to finish out on softer paints. Whereas a gear-driven orbital, if you're trying to finish out on a soft paint, because that thing just has so much more power, is not the really way to say it, sometimes it can leave pad haze or pad marring. So a free spinning tool will fix that. So again, I would choose a rotary. I'd choose a porter cable because it's short stroke. I can use it for sanding or polishing on soft paints. And of course, I choose a gear driven for any time I don't want to use a rotary, but I need a lot of power to plow through a car. Don't know if that helps anybody, but that's how my brain thinks. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. And here's a request. If you've got the exact explanation as to why a long stroke stalls out easier than a short stroke, or why a short stroke stalls out easier than a long stroke, or why it doesn't make any difference, put that down in the comments, but also make your own video like this and explain it to all of us. I mean, I'd love to see that video. I'm just sharing what I think, and it's America. We live in a free society. You can share what you think. So far, it's not illegal. And then I'll finish with this one thing. This is our training garage in sunny Stuart, Florida. There are no chairs. I bring in the most cars, the coolest cars. I cover the most topics, tools, and techniques. And we start early. We start at 7:30. I tell people, if you want a donut and coffee, better get here at 7, because at 7:30, I clap my hands and we go. We start. We don't have any breaks except for a short lunch break, and we go till all the cars for that day are done. So if you find you're the kind of person that learns better by doing versus sitting in a chair looking at a PowerPoint where someone like me drones on and on and on and on, then go to drbeasley.com, find a date that works for you, and get signed up. And by the way, if you want, when anybody signs up for a class, I send them an email that has a link to an article I wrote. I have over 1,000 articles on detailing on the internet. Here's one of them: airports, hotels, and my favorite places to eat in Stuart, Florida. So if you want to travel here, for example, I got a class coming up September 20th, and at this point I got one person from Oregon and 2 people from California. That means they're flying 3,000 miles to take a 2-day class in Florida, and that's because they know they're going to have a fun time. But when people do this, I send this email and it has all the airports in Florida, their exact airport code. I have all the hotels in this area, how far away they are from the shop, and I also include my favorite places to eat. So I make it easy for you to get here and stay here. I've done the legwork for you. And I can send that to you before you sign up for the class. I'm pretty easy to find. And I always like to share my email. Last night on the way home, I got called by 2 people asking about rotary polishers of all things. One guy actually went out and bought a rotary polisher after talking to me. I told him the benefits of a cordless over a corded. They both work, but nowadays when it comes to this is the prototype from 2017. It's 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. It's still going strong. Has all the power of a corded for the most part, but I don't do stupid stuff. Like if I got a boat with really deep oxidation, I don't try to carve it out with the wool pad on rotary. I machine sand it first, then pull out my sanding marks with the rotary. So in that case, that context, a cordless rotary works fine. It would be the wrong tool if all I wanted to do is the caveman approach and push hard and grind on the gel coat for hours. Then I'd want a corded rotary. But I always give out my cell phone, and I'm always happy to answer your questions and see you through to success in your garage. And that is 760-515-0444, and I hope to see you at a future detailing class.